I want to talk about emotional needs and spiritual needs and how parents not meeting these needs in themselves often passes challenges and conditioning, I'll say, down to their children. Okay, and then so first of all, let's start with emotional needs. So what are emotional needs? I think our greatest emotional needs is to be part of something, a belonging need, to be part of a family, to be part of a marriage, part of a family, part of a community, okay, part of a country, part, we are like one of the people, is what some of the Native American people called it. And that's a really big emotional need. Another real fundamental emotional need is being loved and accepted for who we are, like as we are. And it's like however we are, we're loved. And so then we can find ourselves and we're being loved in that way. Similar to that is the need to be heard, the need to be seen, the need, these are some basic emotional needs. And what happens is, so we'll take some of these emotional needs into parenting. And so if the parent doesn't meet their emotional needs, okay, there's a tendency for them for themselves and with other adults, with their significant other, with their family, with their friends, with their community. They have unmet emotional needs, which is, unfortunately, my observation, is fairly common in our culture. It's not the parents' fault. It just is, our culture is not very good at meeting emotional needs. We've lost that sense of community and family and intimacy that meets emotional needs in our culture. So if a parent's emotional needs go unmet, okay, what often happens is, and they have children, what often happens is they meet those emotional needs in their interaction with their children. And this often happens unconsciously. And it feels like we're loving our children. And I'm sure we are loving our children. But our unmet emotional needs ends up kind of bleeding over to the child. And then we end up, then our own children, if we don't feel loved in our marriage, maybe we feel unconditionally loved by our child, okay? And it happens innocently enough, but it causes some real challenges for the child. Because but the ideal is, what I would suggest if you are a parent, is to invest some time in yourself in meeting your emotional needs with adult relationships. Find a way, continue to be whole and to be independent and to meet your emotional needs. And then when you're interacting with your children, you don't need anything from them emotionally. Okay, and then your focus can be on loving them as they are. Okay, and then you can discover who they are and love them. They don't need to be anything for the parent. The child doesn't need to be anything for the parent. Doesn't need to comfort the parent, love the parent unconditionally. Take on roles for the parent. Be what the parent's not getting in their marriage. The child doesn't need to do that. They can just be themselves. Okay? And then that child can grow healthily and live an enjoyable, happy life, and then create healthy relationships because they don't have dysfunctional roles that they've learned, and that type of thing. But I don't want to get too psychological. However, let's talk about the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is when you were raised, there's a good chance that your parents may not have had their emotional needs met, belonging and love needs and those types of things. And so there's a chance that they got their emotional needs met through their interaction with you. So then you learned you had to love and support the little child a child just needs to be loved. So they're going to be whatever the parent needs. If the parent needs something, the child's just going to become that. The challenge with this is, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the challenge with this is then the child can't get to be itself, and it can't get to just be a little kid and have the needs that it has and be loved the way they are. They're loved to be certain things for the parents. And this is largely, the basis of our conditioning. It creates our belief systems, it creates behavioral patterns that we end up working out in relationships and that type of thing down the road. So what do we do with this is even though, however old we are now, okay, we have looked to our parents and meeting their emotional needs maybe to become who we are. And so what we can do now, whatever age we are, is we can start noticing how we are. Like, what does our heart want? Okay, what are we drawn to? What brings us joy, even if it doesn't make any sense? What are our emotional needs? Like, what do we want? How do we like to be loved? Okay, and separate from what the people around us need. Okay, because if we were things for our parents, we're probably those same things in our significant relationships, in our friendships, and we're probably being a caretaker or whatever else in that way. So besides the roles and besides how we're there for everybody else and all that type of stuff, I call it misguided compassion, also could be called codependency, like beyond that stuff, okay, who are we beyond that? That's why, in my tradition, we do vision quest. It's to seek to find out like who and what you really are underneath and beyond all the roles and the conditioning that we picked up from our parents and from our life. So you can do that is like really go on. It's like just notice what you're drawn to, what brings you joy. Okay, how do you like to meet your emotional needs? What is it like? What is who you are like? What are your unique qualities? What are your quirky qualities? Because that's where all the richness is. What are your quirks? What are you this? And how do you laugh? And what do you find funny? And to really explore and honor that. And to just, and then it heals all this past conditioning of being things for other people that usually started in being things for our parents when they didn't meet their emotional needs. So those are some things to think about. Just if so in summary, the thing to think about childhood and healthy childhood is the parent meets their emotional needs, so they need nothing from the child. Okay, and when the parent needs things, it causes challenges. So, and if you're healing that from your own childhood, it's like, how do you meet your emotional needs now? And how do you find people to love and support you for who you are without you trying to be things for them that you are not? And so anyway, that is my video for this week. We could do a whole workshop on this, but it gets pretty deep. But it's been coming up in some of the sessions, and I just wanted to speak about it a little bit. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a wonderful week, and possibly as you go through the week, maybe think about, what was some of the conditioning that maybe you picked up from your parents, or if you have children, how can you meet your emotional needs? And if you don't have children, if you're just wanting to heal that conditioning, like how can you explore who and what you are and find ways to meet your emotional needs? And I will see you in a week.